The sun was shining softly over a quiet neighborhood that afternoon. It was one of those days when the world felt gentle, calm, and warm. The sky was painted a soft blue, with tiny white clouds drifting slowly like little boats on a calm river. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying with it the sweet smell of blooming flowers. Butterflies floated from flower to flower, as if they were dancing to a silent song. In the middle of that peaceful neighborhood stood a small white house with green window frames and a little wooden gate at the front. The backyard of the house was filled with bright flowers, roses, daisies, and marigolds. The grass was soft and freshly cut. There was an old oak tree standing proudly in the middle of the yard, its wide branches offering shade like a giant umbrella. This was Emily's favorite place in the whole world. Emily was a 12-year-old girl with bright brown eyes and soft hair that shined in the sunlight. She loved spending time outside, even if it was just sitting under the oak tree with her dog, Max. She was wearing her favorite light blue t-shirt with tiny stars on it and a pair of soft denim shorts. She had tied her hair back in a loose ponytail, and a few strands danced across her cheeks with the breeze. Emily wasn't like every other kid. She had a rare heart condition that sometimes made her body weak. She couldn't always run as fast as her friends, and she had to carry her medicine with her everywhere. But she never let that stop her from living life with a smile. She loved reading, drawing, and playing in the yard with Max. She believed that every day was a small adventure. Even if she didn't go far from home. Max, her golden retriever, was lying on the soft grass near the oak tree. His fur was golden like honey, and his eyes were warm and full of love. He was not just a pet to Emily. He was her best friend, her guardian, and her little piece of happiness. Max had been trained to help her in emergencies, but even when nothing was wrong, he stayed close to her as if he understood how precious she was. Emily was sitting on a wooden swing that hung from one of the thick branches of the oak tree. Her feet were bare, brushing lightly against the soft grass as she swayed gently back and forth. Max watched her with his big eyes, his tail wagging slowly, as if he was enjoying every second of that quiet afternoon. She picked up a dandelion flower and blew on it. The tiny white seeds floated away, dancing in the air before disappearing into the sky. Emily smiled softly, imagining her wishes flying with them. She had many dreams, some small, like baking cookies with her mom, and some big, like traveling the world one day. But her biggest dream was to live a long, happy life with Max by her side. "Come here, Max," she called out in her sweet voice. Max got up slowly and walked toward her, his paws making a soft sound on the grass. She patted the swing next to her, and he sat down close, resting his head on her lap. She ran her fingers gently through his fur. The bond between them was something words couldn't describe. Max wasn't just an animal to her. He was a friend who listened without speaking, who stayed without being asked, and who loved her without any reason. In the distance, birds were singing a cheerful song. A few leaves fell from the tree, landing softly near her feet. Everything around her felt warm and peaceful. She could hear the faint sound of cars far away on the main road, but it didn't disturb the quietness of her backyard. The world outside might have been busy, but in that little garden, time felt slow and kind. Emily's parents were inside the house, preparing an early dinner. The soft smell of fresh bread drifted through the open kitchen window. It made Emily smile because she loved the taste of her mom's homemade bread. It reminded her of happy mornings and warm hugs. "Max, do you smell that?" She laughed, pointing to the window. "Mom's making bread again. That means we'll have soup tonight. I bet you'll get a little piece too." Max wagged his tail as if he understood every word. His ears perked up, and he licked her hand playfully. The clock on the kitchen wall showed it was just after 4 p.m. The sun was slowly lowering, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. A soft golden light spread across the yard, touching everything gently: the flowers, the swing, the tree, and Emily's face. It made everything look like a scene from a warm, beautiful painting. Emily leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment. She took a deep breath and felt the wind touch her cheeks. She loved moments like this when everything felt perfect. She didn't have to worry about anything. Her heart was calm and her world was safe. She opened her eyes again and noticed a tiny ladybug crawling on her finger. She smiled at it and whispered softly, "Hello, little friend." She watched it crawl for a few seconds before it opened its tiny wings and flew away. Max barked once. Not loudly, but in a playful way, as if saying, "I saw that too." Emily giggled. There was a small wooden bench under the tree where Emily and Max often sat together to watch the sunset. It was old, but her father had built it with his own hands, so it was special to her. She walked over to it and sat down, Max following closely behind. She rested her chin on her knees, looking up at the golden sky. She started talking to Max like she always did. "You know, Max, sometimes I feel a little scared. But then I remember you're here, and I don't feel alone anymore." Max responded the only way he knew, by resting his head gently on her shoulder. Emily wrapped her arms around him, hugging him tightly. He was warm, soft, and always there when she needed him most. The quietness of the yard was like a soft blanket wrapping around them. The wind whispered through the leaves, making them rustle gently. A butterfly landed on one of the roses, making it bend slightly. The air was filled with the sounds of nature, soft, light, and beautiful. This wasn't just any ordinary day for Emily and Max. It was one of those special days that you never forget, even if you don't know why. It was the kind of afternoon that makes you feel safe, happy, and alive. Emily slowly got up from the bench and started skipping toward the small gate at the end of the garden. She loved the little path that led to it because it was lined with small white stones. It felt like walking on a path made just for her. Max followed her closely, his tail moving like a golden feather in the wind. She stopped at the gate and looked out toward the quiet street. The neighborhood was calm. A few kids were riding their bicycles down the road, laughing loudly. An old man was watering his plants. A woman was walking her dog on the other side of the street. Everything seemed so normal, so peaceful. Emily leaned against the gate, watching the world with soft eyes. She loved seeing people going about their day, smiling, talking, laughing. She liked to imagine stories about them. Maybe the old man loved roses. Maybe the kids dreamed of being superheroes. Maybe the woman with the dog loved walking at sunset. She believed every person had a story, just like she did. "Max," she whispered softly, "isn't it a perfect day?" Max wagged his tail in agreement. He didn't need to speak to make her feel understood. That was the magic between them. She opened the little pouch around her waist and checked her medicine like she always did. She had learned to be careful without being afraid. She knew her heart was delicate, but she also knew she was strong. She smiled to herself, zipped the pouch back up, and gently patted it. The wind grew a little cooler as the sun began to lower further. The golden light turned softer, wrapping everything in a warm glow. The shadows grew longer, and the oak tree looked even bigger as it stretched across the yard. Emily walked back to the swing and sat down again. She pushed herself gently, and the swing moved back and forth with a soft creak. She loved that sound. It reminded her of stories her grandmother used to tell, stories of magic, kindness, and hope. Max lay down beside the swing, placing his head on his paws. His eyes followed her every movement. He was calm but alert, always ready if she needed him. Emily started humming a little tune. It was a song she made up herself, a sweet melody with no words, only feelings. Max's ears twitched softly as he listened. Even though it was just a hum, it felt like music meant only for the two of them. At that moment, everything felt perfect. Emily felt happy. She felt safe. She felt loved. She had no idea that in just a short while, her peaceful afternoon would turn into something she would remember forever. She didn't know that the bond she shared with Max would soon be tested in a way that would surprise everyone. But for now, there were no worries, no fear. Just a little girl, a loyal dog, and a golden afternoon that felt endless. Max let out a soft breath, almost like a sigh, and closed his eyes for a second. Emily kept swinging, her hair flowing behind her like a soft ribbon in the wind. The world was quiet, but not empty. It was full of warmth, tiny sounds, and the kind of beauty that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. The sun touched the top of the trees, painting the edges with gold. The air was slowly changing, but Emily didn't notice. She was lost in the simple joy of the moment. She looked down at Max and whispered, "We'll always be together, right?" Max opened his eyes and gave a small bark, the kind that sounded like a promise. Emily smiled, her heart full of trust. Little did she know, very soon, that promise would save her life. The sky had started to change slowly. The soft golden color of the sun was melting into a deeper orange, painting the world in warm shades. The air felt a little cooler, but it carried the sweet smell of the flowers and freshly cut grass. Emily was still sitting on her swing, softly swaying back and forth, humming her little tune. Max lay beside her, his head resting on his paws, his eyes watching her every move. Emily let her toes brush against the ground, making tiny patterns in the dirt. She felt calm, almost like she was wrapped in a soft, invisible blanket of peace. The whole neighborhood seemed quiet. A few birds were flying home, and the sound of their wings was like soft whispers in the air. After a while, Emily decided to get up and stretch her legs. She jumped off the swing gently and took a slow walk around the garden. Max followed her with quiet steps, his golden fur shining in the warm evening light. Emily ran her fingers across the petals of the flowers as she walked. She loved how soft they felt against her skin. She reached the edge of the yard where the little wooden gate stood. It had been painted white a long time ago, but the paint had begun to peel in small places, giving it an old, cozy look. She liked that gate because it felt like a doorway to her little world, the garden where she felt safe, happy, and free. Emily leaned against the gate for a moment, listening to the sounds of the street. She could hear a bicycle bell ringing in the distance. Somewhere far off, someone was playing soft music. The evening felt like a picture drawn with gentle strokes. She bent down to tie her shoelaces properly. She was always careful about little things like that because of her health. She couldn't afford to trip or fall too hard. When she stood up again, she took out the small pouch around her waist and checked her medication like she did every day. It was part of her routine. She didn't like carrying it, but she knew it kept her safe. She opened the pouch, looked at the vial carefully, then zipped it back up. She didn't know it yet, but this tiny action would soon matter more than she could imagine. Emily turned to Max and smiled. "Let's go play near the tree for a little while," she said softly. Max barked happily, his tail wagging fast. He loved when she said things like that. It meant playtime, and playtime with Emily was his favorite part of the day. She picked up a small red ball from near the flower bed. It was slightly old, but still bounced well. She threw it gently across the yard, and Max ran after it, his ears flapping as he moved. Emily laughed as she watched him. He picked up the ball in his mouth and came trotting back proudly, like he had just completed a big mission. "Good boy," she said, clapping her hands. Max wagged his tail even faster, dropping the ball at her feet. She threw it again, this time a little farther. He ran again, happy and full of energy. For a while, the world was only filled with their laughter, Max's soft barks, and the sound of the ball bouncing on the grass. It was simple joy, but it was everything to Emily. She played until she felt a little tired. Her heart sometimes beat too fast when she moved too much, so she knew when to slow down. She took a seat on the wooden bench under the oak tree again, and Max came to sit right next to her. She gently leaned against his warm body, feeling safe and loved. A gentle breeze blew through the yard, making the leaves dance above them. A few petals from the flowers floated through the air and landed on Max's fur. Emily giggled softly and brushed them off, but just as she reached down to do that, she felt something slip from the pouch around her waist. It was so quiet and gentle that she didn't even notice. The small vial of her medicine slid out slowly and landed on the soft grass a few steps away from the bench. It rolled a little and came to rest near the small white stones by the gate. Max tilted his head slightly, noticing the movement, but Emily didn't see it. She was busy looking at the sky, where the first faint star had started to shine. She loved looking at stars. They made her feel like the world was bigger than her worries. She whispered softly to Max, "Do you see that, Max? The first star is here. Maybe I'll make a wish tonight." Max wagged his tail in response, his eyes still alert and following her every breath. The evening light grew softer. The warm orange sky slowly turned into a shade of pink, and the shadows in the garden grew longer. A soft chill passed through the air, brushing against Emily's skin. She pulled her knees closer to her chest and hugged them lightly. She didn't notice that the little vial was no longer with her. She didn't know that her safety was sitting just a few steps away on the ground. A few minutes passed. Emily decided to stand up and walk toward the gate again. Max followed, as always. She wanted to watch the sunset from there. It was something she loved doing every evening. It made her heart feel light dawn as she walked. Her foot brushed against one of the small stones by the path. It moved under her foot, making her lose her balance for just a second. It wasn't a big fall, just a small stumble. But for someone like Emily, even small things could bring unexpected trouble. She reached out to grab the wooden gate to steady herself, but in that short moment, something changed inside her chest. A strange tightness filled her heart. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sudden like a loud noise. It was quiet but deep, like the tightening of a knot. She froze for a moment, her hand still on the gate. Her breath felt a little harder to take in. The air suddenly felt heavy, and the garden, which had felt so warm a moment ago, seemed distant. Max's ears perked up immediately. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew something was wrong. Emily tried to take a slow breath, but it didn't feel like enough. She looked down at Max, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but couldn't. Her hand moved slowly toward her pouch, the one she always carried. But when she opened it, her fingers meant nothing. The little vial that was supposed to be there wasn't. Her heart skipped a beat. Her eyes widened a little, and her hands trembled. She looked around quickly, but the world seemed to blur around the edges. She felt a small wave of dizziness wash over her, making it hard to focus. Max stood in front of her now, his tail no longer wagging. He sensed her distress. The sound of the birds, the soft wind, the distant music, it all felt like it was fading behind a curtain. She tried to call for her parents, but her voice came out too soft, almost like a whisper. Max took a step closer, nudging her gently with his nose. His eyes were wide, focused on her face. He remembered this kind of situation. He had been trained for moments like this. Emily's breathing grew shallow. She placed one hand on her chest, trying to steady herself. She looked around again, and then her eyes caught the small sparkle of glass lying near the white stones by the gate. It was her medicine. It wasn't far, but at that moment, it felt like it was miles away. She took one small step toward it, but her legs felt weak. She almost stumbled again, catching herself on the gate. Her heartbeat felt uneven now, not like its usual soft rhythm. The quiet garden began to feel strange, like it was slowly spinning around her. Max barked softly once, a sound that was different from his playful bark. It was serious, sharp, almost like a signal. She tried again to walk toward the vial, but her knees trembled. She lowered herself carefully to the ground, breathing slowly but heavily. Her hand reached out in the air, but it didn't reach the vial. Max moved closer, circling her like he was trying to understand every movement she made. The world around her began to lose its bright colors. She could still see the sky, but it looked softer now, distant, like a painting behind a foggy window. The sound of her own breathing was the only thing she could hear clearly. Max moved even closer and gently touched her arm with his nose, like he was asking her what to do. She looked at him weakly, her lips parting but no clear words coming out. He didn't need words. He understood. She had only a few minutes before the situation could become very serious. The sunset continued, painting the sky in soft pink and gold, unaware of the small girl sitting weakly near the gate. Reaching out for something she could not reach. Max stood tall now, no longer lying down lazily like before. His ears were up and his eyes were sharp. The soft, happy playtime they had earlier was gone. This was something different. He looked at Emily once more, and something inside him told him exactly what he needed to do. The peaceful garden had turned into a quiet moment of worry, a test of loyalty and love. Max was ready to act, and that was the moment everything began to change. The garden, which had been full of light and laughter just a little while ago, now felt strangely quiet. The sun was still slowly sinking into the horizon, painting the sky with soft pink and orange shades. But for Emily, everything seemed a little blurry. Her breathing was becoming shallow, and her small hands trembled slightly. She sat near the gate, her back leaning against the wooden fence, trying to stay calm. Max stood right beside her. His tail wasn't wagging anymore. His ears were straight, and his warm brown eyes stayed fixed on her face. He could feel it. Something was wrong with his best friend. Emily tried to take a deep breath, but it felt like the air was slipping away too quickly. Her chest felt tight, not in a painful way, but like someone had quietly taken away a piece of the air she needed. She knew these moments. She had experienced them before, but this one felt a little different. It was coming faster. She pressed her hand lightly over her heart, hoping it would calm down, but it didn't. She turned her head slowly and saw the small vial of her medicine lying near the white stones. It wasn't far at all, maybe a few steps away, but her legs felt like they were made of feathers too weak to carry her. She stretched out her arm toward it, but her fingers didn't reach. "Max," she whispered softly, her voice barely louder than the breeze. Max moved closer to her, his nose touching her arm gently. He tilted his head, as if asking what she wanted him to do. His heart seemed to understand even though she didn't say much. She tried to speak again, but her breath broke into tiny gasps. Her eyes met Max's, and in that quiet look, he understood. The sound of the evening birds faded into the background. The wind moved softly through the oak tree, making the leaves rustle gently. The soft glow of the sunset fell over Emily's face, making her look calm even though her heart was racing unevenly. Max took a small step forward, then another, his body lowering slightly as if ready to act. Emily leaned her head back against the fence and closed her eyes for just a second. She told herself to stay awake. She knew she had to stay awake. She had been told what to do many times in emergencies. Breathe slowly, she thought. Don't panic. Max knows. Max will help. And Max did know. He quickly looked at her pouch and then at the small glass vial on the ground. Then he turned toward the house. He barked once loud and clear. It wasn't a playful bark. It was sharp and filled with urgency. The kind of bark he had been trained to use in emergencies. Inside the house, Emily's parents were busy in the kitchen, preparing dinner. The windows were open, so the bark reached them. Her mom lifted her head and looked out, feeling something different about the sound. Max didn't bark like that unless something was wrong. Meanwhile, Max moved closer to the vial. He lowered his nose to the ground and carefully picked it up with his mouth. He had been trained to handle it gently. He turned back toward Emily, who was now breathing slowly and carefully, trying to stay awake. Her face was pale, but her eyes were still open. She was fighting quietly, holding on with everything she had. Max placed the vial right near her hand, but he didn't stop there. He turned again toward the house and barked even louder this time. His voice echoed softly through the quiet street. Emily's mom heard it again. This time, she didn't wait. She ran to the window and saw Max near the gate, barking, moving around Emily's still figure. Her heart skipped a beat. "Something's wrong," she said to Emily's dad, and they rushed out of the kitchen. But even before they reached her, Max stayed close, gently nudging Emily's arm with his nose to keep her awake. He remembered the training. He knew she must not close her eyes. He made soft, worried sounds, the kind of sound that could keep someone from falling asleep. Emily blinked slowly, looking at Max through half-open eyes. "Good boy," she whispered in a soft, trembling voice. Even in that weak moment, her love for him shined through. She tried to lift her hand toward the vial, but her fingers were shaking. Max moved his head slightly, pushing the vial closer so she didn't have to reach too far. The sunlight was slowly fading now. The last golden rays touched the top of the oak tree, making the yard look warm even though the air had turned cooler. Emily's parents were running toward her, their feet making soft thuds on the grass. Max barked again, just once, as if calling them faster. Then he returned his attention to Emily, licking her hand gently to keep her awake. Emily's breathing was growing slower, and she felt a light ringing in her ears. But Max's warm presence kept her from feeling afraid. She focused on his soft fur, his big brown eyes, and the gentle sound of his breath. Her mother reached her first, kneeling beside her. Her hands were shaking, but she tried to stay calm. She picked up the vial that Max had brought close. Her father quickly called for help, while her mom carefully helped Emily with what she needed. Max stayed right next to Emily the whole time, pressing his warm body gently against her leg. His tail moved slightly, as if saying, "I'm here. Don't worry." Emily's mom whispered softly, "Good boy. Max, good boy," as tears formed in her eyes, not tears of fear alone, but of deep love for the dog who had just done something truly remarkable. Emily's breathing slowly began to even out, though she was still weak. She blinked a few times, focusing on her mom's face, then on Max. She could see how worried he was. She could feel how much he loved her. She gave him a tiny smile, the kind that said thank you without any words. Her dad stayed on the phone, giving their address and explaining the situation to the emergency team. Her mom gently brushed the hair away from Emily's forehead, whispering, "You're okay, sweetheart. We're right here." But the truth was, Max had made the biggest difference in those first few minutes. Without him, everything could have been so much worse. The sirens were still far away, but the neighborhood had grown quiet. A few neighbors who heard the barking stepped out of their houses. They stood near their gates, watching with concerned faces. One of them even rushed over to help if needed. Max didn't care about the neighbors. His entire world in that moment was Emily. He kept his eyes locked on her face, his ears turning with every sound she made. If she moved even a little, he reacted. If her breathing changed, he noticed. Emily reached out weakly and rested her small hand on his head. Her fingers trembled slightly, but the warmth of his fur calmed her. She whispered softly, "You're my hero, Max." The sound of the approaching ambulance became faintly audible in the distance. Max's ears twitched at the sound, but he didn't move away. He stayed right where he was, as if he had made a silent promise to never leave her side. The sky above them had turned into a soft purple now, with tiny stars beginning to appear. The oak tree's shadow stretched long across the garden, wrapping them all in a quiet evening moment that would soon be remembered forever. Emily's mom kept holding her hand, whispering gentle words. Her dad stayed near the gate, waiting for help to arrive. Max lay down beside Emily, but not fully resting. He was alert, ready to move if she needed him again. His breathing matched hers, like they were connected by something deeper than words. A gentle wind passed through the garden, making the flowers sway lightly. A few petals fell and landed softly on Emily's hair. She didn't even notice them, but Max did. He tilted his head slightly, as if keeping watch over even the smallest details. Emily closed her eyes just for a moment, not from fear, but because she was tired. But Max nudged her arm gently with his nose, reminding her to stay awake. She opened her eyes again and whispered, "I'm okay," as if speaking to him directly. The red and white lights of the ambulance finally appeared at the end of the street. The soft sound of its wheels and distant sirens broke the silence of the evening. Emily's parents felt a rush of relief, but Max didn't react with excitement like most dogs would. He stayed calm, as if he understood the seriousness of the moment. His job wasn't over yet. When the paramedics came through the gate, Max stepped back just a little but kept his eyes on Emily. He let the helpers do their work, but his tail moved softly, and his ears followed every sound. The neighbors watched, quietly as the paramedics carefully tended to Emily. The golden retriever sitting near her looked like a guardian angel in fur. Emily looked at Max one more time as they helped her. Her eyes were soft, tired, but full of love. She whispered his name one more time, and Max let out a quiet breath, almost like a gentle sigh. In those few minutes, when everything could have gone wrong, Max had been everything: her protector, her strength, and her miracle. And though he didn't speak a single word, what he did spoke louder than anything else could. The flashing red and white lights from the ambulance painted soft, moving colors across the quiet street. The sound of footsteps, soft voices, and the gentle hum of the vehicle filled the air. The calm evening that had started with laughter and warm sunshine had now become an evening full of quiet, concern, and deep emotion. Emily was lying on a stretcher near the gate now. She was awake, though still a little weak. Her cheeks were pale, but her eyes were open. She could see everything around her, her parents standing nearby with worried faces, the neighbors watching silently from their gates, and Max sitting faithfully near her feet. Even in the middle of all the movement and quiet panic around her, Max didn't move away from her side. His golden fur glowed faintly in the soft lights, and his big brown eyes stayed fixed on her. He wasn't barking or running around like a scared dog. He was calm, steady, and alert. It was as if he knew that staying close to her was his most important job right now. Emily's mom gently held her hand. "You're going to be fine, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling just a little. Her dad stood close behind her, his hand resting softly on her shoulder, giving her strength without saying a word. Emily gave a weak smile. "I know," she whispered back. Her voice was soft, but there was a quiet bravery in it. One of the paramedics, a kind woman with kind eyes, knelt down next to her. She spoke gently, asking Emily how she felt, if she could breathe better now. Emily nodded slowly, her small hands still trembling just a little. Max tilted his head, listening carefully to everything. His ears twitched at every sound Emily made. When the paramedic reached to adjust something on Emily's arm, Max shifted forward slightly, as if checking to make sure it was okay. The paramedic smiled softly at him. "Don't worry, buddy. We're helping her," she said kindly. Emily whispered, "That's Max. He's my best friend." The woman smiled even more warmly. "He's a good friend," she said gently. The neighbors continued to watch from their homes, some with their hands over their mouths, others holding on to their children. They had heard about service dogs, but seeing one act so bravely with their own eyes was something entirely different. It didn't feel like a story from far away anymore. It was happening right in front of them. Emily's mom knelt beside her and gently brushed the hair away from her forehead. "You scared me," she whispered softly, tears shining in her eyes. Emily managed a tiny smile. "I'm okay, Mom. Max helped me." Her mom turned her eyes toward the golden retriever, who was now sitting tall, still alert. She reached out and gently touched Max's head. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. Max didn't understand the words fully, but he understood her touch. He leaned into it softly, then turned his gaze back to Emily. The air felt cool now. The sun was almost gone, leaving behind a soft purple and blue sky. A few stars had already started to appear, twinkling gently like little lights watching over them. The oak tree cast a long shadow across the garden, and the flowers swayed gently in the breeze. The paramedics carefully lifted the stretcher. Max stood up quickly, following them as they walked toward the ambulance. He didn't bark. He didn't run. He just walked right next to them, step by step, as if saying, "I'm not letting her go alone." Emily turned her head slightly to look at him as they moved. She saw the familiar golden fur, the soft movement of his tail, and those eyes that had never left her for even a second. She whispered his name, and Max wagged his tail slowly, his eyes glowing softly in the evening light. Her parents climbed into the ambulance with her, holding her hands. The paramedics began their careful work, checking her heartbeat, her breathing, and making sure everything was steady. They spoke in calm, soft voices, the kind of voices that made even a worried moment feel a little safer that Max couldn't get inside the ambulance. But he stood near the open door, looking up at Emily. One of the neighbors who had come closer gently held onto his collar to keep him safe near the gate. Max didn't pull away. He just kept his eyes on her, his whole body still. Emily's mom leaned over and whispered to her, "Max will come with us soon. He's not going anywhere." Emily nodded slowly, her fingers still wrapped around her mom's hand. She closed her eyes for a second, not because she was tired in a scary way, but because she felt safe now. Max was watching her, her parents were beside her, and the kind voices of the paramedics filled the space around her. The ambulance doors closed gently. Max tilted his head, watching as the lights on top of the vehicle started to flash brighter. The sound of the engine came alive, soft but steady. The neighbors moved aside as the vehicle slowly rolled away down the street. Max stood at the gate, his ears turned forward, his eyes following the ambulance as it disappeared around the corner. His tail didn't wag anymore. He stood still, patient, waiting. Even though she wasn't in sight anymore, he knew exactly where his heart belonged. One of the neighbors, an older woman who had watched everything quietly, bent down and patted Max gently. "You're a brave boy," she said softly. "She's lucky to have you." Max lowered his head slightly, as if he understood, and then lay down near the gate. He didn't bark. He didn't move around. He simply waited. Meanwhile, inside the ambulance, Emily was breathing more easily now. The paramedics smiled softly at her. "You're doing great," one of them said gently. Emily whispered, "I want Max." Her mom stroked her hair and said, "He's right behind us. He'll be there soon. He's been so brave." Emily smiled weakly. "I know. He always is." The soft sound of the siren echoed faintly in the night as the ambulance made its way through the quiet streets. The stars above seemed to follow them, sparkling like little promises. When they reached the hospital, everything was bright and calm. Nurses and doctors were waiting, ready to help her. They moved gently, quickly, but with care. Emily felt nervous at first, but when she remembered Max's face, she felt a little braver. Her parents stayed beside her every step of the way. The hospital room smelled clean and quiet. Machines hummed softly, and the lights above were warm and gentle. The doctors checked her heartbeat, her breathing, and gave her what she needed. Emily lay in the hospital bed, her body finally starting to feel more stable. She turned her head toward the window. She could see the dark night sky and the stars outside. She thought about Max sitting near the gate, waiting. She whispered softly, "Good boy, Max. You saved me." Her mom, sitting in the chair next to her, heard her whisper. She smiled through her tired eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. He really did." Back at home, Max was still lying near the gate. One of the neighbors had brought him a small bowl of water, but he didn't drink much. He lifted his head every time a car passed by, hoping it was the one bringing her home. His eyes were soft but full of determination. The oak tree stood quietly behind him, and the night grew deeper. A soft wind moved through the flowers, carrying the scent of roses and marigolds through the air. It was peaceful, but Max wasn't sleeping. He was waiting. A few hours later, the sound of a car came down the road. Max lifted his head. It wasn't just any car. It was the one he had been waiting for. He jumped up and wagged his tail, his whole body moving with excitement. The car stopped near the gate, and the door opened. Emily's dad stepped out first. He opened the back door slowly. Emily was there, tired but smiling. The soft porch light shined on her face, making her look calm and safe. "Max." She called softly. Max ran forward, his tail wagging so fast it almost looked like a blur. He stopped right in front of her, his nose brushing her hand gently. He didn't jump or bark loudly. It was as if he knew she needed him to be gentle. Emily knelt down slowly, her hands finding the warm fur on his head. She pressed her forehead against his and whispered, "You're my hero." Max let out a soft breath, almost like he was answering her without words. His tail kept wagging softly as he leaned closer to her. Her parents watched them from a step away, their eyes filled with both relief and deep emotion. They'd always known Max was special, but that night, he had shown them something beyond words, something pure, loyal, and extraordinary. The neighbors who had seen everything from their gates smiled softly. A few of them waved to Emily, happy to see her back home. The old woman who had patted Max earlier whispered, "Good boy," again from a distance. Emily slowly walked toward the oak tree with Max by her side. The night was quiet. The stars were shining gently. Everything felt different, but in the best way possible. She sat down on the wooden bench, her hand still on Max's fur. "Do you know, Max," she whispered softly, "you gave me another chance today. I'll never forget it." Max rested his head on her knee, his eyes half closed, but his tail still moving. The garden, which had been filled with worry just a few hours earlier, was now calm again. The soft night breeze, the rustling leaves, and the quiet hum of crickets wrapped around them like a warm hug. Emily's parents watched them for a while before going inside the house. Leaving the two best friends together under the old oak tree, Emily leaned back, looking up at the stars. "I think they're shining brighter tonight," she said softly. Max gave a small, content sigh, as if agreeing with her. And so they sat there quietly, side by side. No more rushing, no more fear, just a girl and her loyal dog under a starry night, grateful for a miracle that words could never fully describe. The night after everything happened was quiet and beautiful. The stars sparkled like little lights in the dark sky. A soft breeze moved through the oak tree, making the leaves rustle gently, almost like a lullaby. The garden, which had once held fear and worry earlier that day, now felt warm again, like a safe little corner of the world. Emily sat on the wooden bench near the oak tree, wrapped in a soft blanket. The porch light glowed softly, making the yard look golden and peaceful. Max lay on the ground right beside her, his big golden body curled close to her feet, his tail moving slowly every few seconds. Emily gently ran her fingers through his fur, feeling its warmth. She wasn't weak anymore. Her breathing was steady, and her heartbeat was calm. The hospital visit earlier had been scary, but the doctors said she was okay now. She just needed rest and care. But more than anything, she needed Max, and he was right there. "Max," she whispered softly, "you were so brave today. You saved me." Max tilted his head and looked up at her with those big, warm eyes. He didn't understand every word she said, but he understood her voice, her feelings, her love. He lifted his head and rested it gently on her knee. Emily smiled. Her heart felt full. She knew that she would remember this day for the rest of her life. It wasn't just about the moment she got scared. It was about the moment her best friend, her loyal dog, became her miracle. The house behind them was quiet now. Her parents were sitting inside, talking softly. They hadn't stopped thanking Max since they came back. They called him their hero, their angel. Emily liked hearing that. To her, Max had always been a hero. But now the whole world knew it too. She leaned down and pressed her forehead gently against his. "You're more than my dog," she whispered. "You're my best friend." The stars above them shined a little brighter, as if they were listening. The next morning, sunlight filled the house again. Warm golden light spilled through the windows, landing softly on the kitchen floor. Birds were singing outside, and the flowers in the garden stood tall, their petals opening to greet the new day. Emily woke up early, feeling stronger. She walked slowly to the backyard, where Max was already sitting under the oak tree. It was his favorite place. He looked up as soon as he saw her, his tail wagging gently. "Good morning, hero," she said with a bright smile. She sat down beside him on the grass. It felt cool and fresh against her skin. Max leaned closer to her, resting his head on her lap. She stroked his ears gently. The morning felt quiet but special, like the start of something new. The neighbors had heard about what happened. Some had seen it with their own eyes. By the time the sun was fully up, a few of them were already at the gate, smiling softly and waving at Emily. "Good morning, Emily," one of them called. "Good morning," she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. An older woman who lived next door walked up to the fence. She held a small basket with flowers. "These are for you," she said kindly. "And for Max, too. He's a very special dog." Emily walked to the gate slowly, Max following close behind her. She accepted the flowers with both hands and smiled warmly. "Thank you. He really is special," she said proudly. Looking down at Max, the woman bent down and patted Max's head. "Good boy," she said softly. "You're a little hero, aren't you?" Max wagged his tail happily, enjoying the attention. Soon, a few more neighbors came by. Some brought small treats for Max, others just came to say kind words. They all had the same warm expression on their faces, one of amazement and gratitude. What Max had done wasn't something everyone saw every day. Emily stood at the gate, holding the flowers, her heart full. It felt strange and beautiful at the same time to see so many people moved by what had happened. Later in the day, Emily's dad received a call. Someone from the local newspaper had heard about Max's brave act. They wanted to come and take a photo of him and write a story about what he did. Emily's parents looked at each other and smiled. Max was about to become famous, not because of tricks or shows, but because of love. When the reporter arrived, Max didn't really understand what was happening. All he cared about was staying close to Emily. She knelt beside him in the garden, holding him gently. The camera clicked softly, capturing a picture of the girl and her golden retriever under the big oak tree. The reporter asked Emily a few simple questions. She answered softly, telling them how Max had saved her. She didn't use big or complicated words. She just said the truth. He knew. He just knew I needed him, she said. Looking at Max. The reporter smiled and said, "He's a very special friend." "Yes," Emily replied softly. "He's my miracle." When the story was published the next day, everyone in the neighborhood saw the photo. It showed a little girl with bright brown eyes and a warm smile, sitting next to her loyal dog with golden fur. The headline called Max a local hero. But to Emily, he was much more than that. Over the next few days, more people came by to see them. Some brought toys for Max, others brought cards. Kids from the street would stop by the gate just to wave at him. Max didn't fully understand why so many people were smiling at him, but he wagged his tail and greeted them all. Emily's parents decided to hang a small ribbon on Max's collar, a soft red ribbon that said, "Hero," in shiny letters. When Emily placed it around his neck for the first time, Max tilted his head, curious. Emily laughed softly. "You earned it," she said gently. Life slowly went back to normal. But something in Emily's heart had changed. She felt a little stronger, a little braver, because she knew she wasn't alone. She had a friend who would always be there, no matter what. One evening, a few weeks later, she sat again on the wooden swing under the oak tree. The air was warm, and the sky was painted in soft gold. Max was lying near her feet, just like he always did. She thought about everything that had happened, the quiet afternoon, the scary moment, the flashing lights, and the way Max had stayed by her side through it all. She took a deep breath and smiled. She whispered softly, "Thank you, Max." Max lifted his head slightly, as if to say, "You're welcome." Emily closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the sound of the wind in the trees. She didn't need anything else at that moment. She had her garden, her stars, and her best friend. The neighbors never forgot what Max did that day. Some called him the Golden Hero. Others simply called him the Miracle Dog. But for Emily, those titles didn't matter. He was simply Max, the same dog who slept near her bed, waited for her at the gate, and followed her everywhere. Emily's parents noticed that Max seemed even more protective of her now. If she went to the yard, he followed. If she sat on the swing, he lay beside her. If she walked down the street, he stayed close. He didn't need anyone to tell him what to do. He just knew. One morning, Emily woke up to find a small silver tag hanging from Max's collar. Her dad had gotten it made. On one side, it had Max's name. On the other, it had two simple words, "My hero." Emily's eyes sparkled as she held the tag in her hands. She hugged Max tightly and whispered, "You really are my hero." The bond between them grew even stronger with time. People often said, "Dogs are loyal," but Emily knew it was more than that. It was love, pure and simple. A love that didn't need words. A love that was always there, quiet but powerful. Months passed, and every time Emily walked through the garden, she remembered that day. But she didn't remember it with fear anymore. She remembered it with warmth. It became a reminder of courage, friendship, and a bond that could never be broken. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, she would sit under the oak tree with Max and watch the stars. She loved the way they twinkled like little lights just for them. She would rest her head on Max's back, and he would stay still, letting her lean on him. She didn't have to say anything. He didn't either. Their hearts already understood. The story of Max's bravery spread far beyond their neighborhood. Some people wrote letters to Emily's family. Others sent small gifts for Max, but no matter how much attention he got, Max remained the same, gentle, calm, and always by Emily's side. Her parents often said, that day could have ended very differently. And every time they said that, they looked at Max with grateful eyes. Emily sometimes thought about how scared she had felt for a few seconds. But then she remembered how quickly Max had acted, how he hadn't left her side. how his presence made everything feel a little less frightening. And so, every single night, before going to bed, Emily would kneel down beside Max, give him a soft hug, and whisper, "Good night, Max. Thank you." He would respond the same way every night, with a quiet wag of his tail and a soft look in his eyes. It wasn't just a story anymore. It became part of their lives, a gentle memory that lived inside their home, their hearts, and their quiet little garden. Emily grew up knowing what true loyalty looked like. And Max spent his days doing what he loved the most, protecting the girl he loved more than anything else. The oak tree stood tall as the seasons changed. The flowers bloomed and faded, and the stars continued to shine above their little home. And under that oak tree, their story remained, a story of a girl, her golden dog, and a miracle that would live in their hearts forever.